be therefore fair to say that apart from what was an election rhetoric, Trump may not really stick to what he promised earlier, which is higher tariffs on China? That's number one. Number two, what are you making of the fact that a Chinese premier, if he decides to come, if Xi Jinping decides to come, I think it will be a sight for sore eyes to see Xi Jinping sitting in the crowd while Donald Trump takes oath, at the same time be included in Western circles, something that China as an ideology has so far stayed away from in its history of existence.
Shweta, Ambassador Goyal beautifully brought about the Chinese mindset in which going to such an inauguration will be seen similar to King's coronation. And of course, all of us remember volumes and volumes written on how both Henry Kissinger and President Nixon had for the first time visited and met Mao in his study. And that kind of sense of pride in several Asian leaders obviously will not allow that President Xi will be sitting there among large number of audience without knowing absolutely nothing about what President Trump is going to speak in his inaugural address, as he is known to be unpredictable in that sense. Even North Korean leaders, you remember, did not go to American continent, anywhere north, south or Caribbean. It is thrice President Trump who had come all the way to Asia to have 3 summit meetings with Kim Jong-un. So that part is understandable. More curious to me will be whether the entire elite of American politics that will be sitting there will be happy to see their adversary, enemy, systemic challenge and the leader of a country that worries them all the time sitting among the guests there with them. So, it looks like very strange kind of a proposition, but so is President Trump, known to make such kind of unusual remarks, one-liners and quips. I don't think it's a serious proposition that the President of China will be attending the inaugural part. As far as the issue which you asked about tariffs going up, that of course remains equally unpredictable. You remember he's spoken about raising it by 10%, then talking about ratcheting up to 60%, then he spoke of BRICS de-dollarization debate, meaning he will raise it to 100%. But these are two inordinately large economies, 27, 28 trillion versus nearly 20 trillion. Others, third, fourth, fifth are much smaller. So their economic relationship going through any deceleration is not going to be harming only one side, it's going to be harming the other side. American exports last year have already gone down, particularly in commodity, about 4% down last year. For even critical minerals, they both need each other. In chip production, they both need each other. And in fact, their science and technology agreement that you mentioned, lapsed in August, needs to be renewed. So I think some of these, sort of ups and downs will continue. Okay. I also remember the unusual trust that Trump has in his personality force. He can imagine that he can achieve things which are not possible, and he did that. Last time, you remember his quick agreement with China on making China agree to additional imports from United States of over $270 billion every year to adjust the deficit, which was a major problem at that time. So there is a possibility of deals being made, as Ambassador Goyal said, but I see no possibility of President Xi Jinping going to attend the inauguration of President Donald Trump.
Okay, all right. Professor Swaran Singh, I think an important point that you brought about is that we are talking about the largest and the second largest economies in the world, the US and China. Both need each other and rely on each other for imports and exports, and as a result of which the recent developments so as to suggest that if there were to be coming together, and if at all, and let's assume that Xi Jinping makes it to the inauguration, we are looking at ties which will be closer in years to come.
I think we should also underline, Shweta, the fact that it's not that they don't have relationship. I mean, it's a huge $700+ billion trade that they still have. So, there is an enormous economic relationship, enormous academic, scientific, all kinds of cooperation that also goes on along with the geopolitical contestation. Interesting it is, as Ambassador Goyal was mentioning, there is no other name. Only other name in the media is that of Viktor Orban of Hungary, who's supposed to be the only leader in European Union who is known to be slightly soft on President Putin. What kind of list of names is there? Nobody knows that. So I think it's very, very Trump-like kind of a initiative once again, which is hilarious in many ways. But you mentioned of his sense of trumping over several other leaders around the world. I remember I mentioned Kim Jong-un 3 summit meetings. Yes, they met thrice. Trump came all the way to Asia. Result, zero. So I don't think here with President Xi Jinping not accepting that kind of invitation has as much sort of impact on Chinese leader as much it would have on the leader who is inviting him to come to the inauguration by being sort of snubbed, shall we say, by not accepting the invitation. But that of course will not mean that the relationship will suddenly drop and then go bad. And there are several elements on which both will continue to work together, several elements where they will continue to contest. China definitely is coming back as number one challenge to United States. And in that sense, one can see a certain period of relief for President Putin. Effort, of course, also very clearly on part of President Donald Trump is to create some kind of a, sort of problem between Russia and China.
Right.
So differently trying to engage each of these two leaders one-to-one, separately. And in that sense, trying to cast a wedge between these two leaders, which makes him a little worried about them coming together. But we are back to China becoming challenge number one for United States and not Russia being challenge number one, as was seen during President Biden's period.
All right, and if we are to conclude this, I think this segment, I think it'd be fair to say that Trump coming in is going to change a lot geopolitically as far as who's going to be enemy number one or adversary number one is concerned, at least in near term. And Trump's invitation there to Chinese Premier Xi Jinping will have to, of course, wait whether there's going to be an acceptance or not. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. Professor Swaran Singh, Ambassador Suresh Goyal, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the show today.